In Canada is coming round the final corner now for his latest win. It's win number 91. The record is equalled. Schumacher and Hamilton, the most successful drivers of all time in terms of race wins. Hamilton takes the Eiffel Grand Prix.
I think I might be about to start a war here, but here goes. Anyways, what's going on, guys? It is Christopher here, back in the building, and today I'm going to be discussing whether Lewis Hamilton really is F1's greatest driver. So, as we all know, Lewis won his 91st race at the Eiffel GP at the Nürburgring, tying Michael Schumacher's illustrious 91 race win record. It seems to me pretty much Lewis is destined to break every single record that stands in front of him in the F1 record books. But before I get into the debate as to whether Hamilton is the greatest F1 driver of all time, I'm going to tell you guys some of the stats that stack up. Well, first and foremost, he is tied first with Michael Schumacher, who you guys see on the screen right now, for 91 race wins. Lewis is the second youngest first-time world champion, and he has 159 race podiums and counting. And last but not least, Hamilton has 6 world titles, which is second on the all-time list. Anyway, guys, without further ado, let's get started on the debate. Is Hamilton F1's greatest driver of all time? By the way, I am going to keep the debate short and sweet, and I'm going to provide 3 reasons as to why Hamilton is F1's greatest driver of all time and why he isn't. And point number 1, why he's the greatest driver of all time, is his consistency. Because in each and every single F1 season Hamilton has competed in, he has won a race. From Hamilton's debut in 2007, where, by the way, Fernando Alonso, the reigning world champion at the time, was his teammate at McLaren, won 4 of the 17 races and finished second in his first year in F1. The following year, we all know Lewis won the world championship on the last corner of the last lap at Interlagos in 2008. 2009, he won 2 races in a McLaren car that pretty much underwhelmed on the grid. 2010 and 2011, he won 3 races, despite the fact that in 2011, he spent more times battling it out with Felipe Massa than he was focusing on his own driving. And 2013, where statistically, in terms of race wins, he only won once. Yes, and I said it, once, throughout the whole 2013 season, despite the fact that it was dominated heavily by Red Bull. But the fact of the matter is that Lewis has won in each and every single F1 season he has competed in. Point number 2, the records, well, they surely speak for themselves, don't they? The fact that he's won 6 world titles, he's tied the record for the most number of races in F1 history, the most number of poles, surely that's not a mark of consistency or a mark of excellence in itself. Am I not mistaken? Continuing on with my point, Hamilton is still in his mid-30s compared to other drivers back in the 60s, 70s, even the 80s, where they'd reach their mid-30s and pretty much say, that's it, they've had enough. Hamilton's still very much going strong in his mid-30s and looks set to go even further in his F1 career compared to other drivers when they hit their mid-30s. This longevity is something that arguably has helped Hamilton in his career, and this could help him even further when it comes to trying to break further F1 records. And last but not least, point number 3, and you could argue this is a bit of a weak point, but I'm going to say it anyways. But in the turbo hybrid era in Formula 1, Lewis has picked up 5 of the possible 6 world championships at his disposal, the only one being 2016, where he lost out to Nico Rosberg. As most F1 fans know, in 2014, the sport underwent some of the biggest rule changes in the sport's recent history, with the end of the V8 engines, or the 2.4 litre V8 engines I should be saying, and they were changed to 1.6 litre V6 turbocharged engines. There was also a change from the old KERS to ERS, which stands for the Energy Recovery System, but I'm not going to go into too much detail about the rule changes. But the fact of the matter is, Hamilton has absolutely dominated the turbo hybrid era, And for me, that gets recognition for one of the three reasons why I think Lewis Hamilton should be discussed as one of F1's greatest F1 drivers. Right, as always, to any debate or argument, to one side there's another side of the argument. And point number one for the reasons why Hamilton is not the greatest F1 driver of all time is the fact that he is arguably, and I say arguably because it is other people's opinion. By the way, I'm just stating what I see, but he's arguably had the best F1 car in each of his world title triumphs. For those that don't know, Hamilton has raced in only two teams in his F1 career, McLaren and Mercedes. McLaren obviously brought him his first title triumph in 2008, and since 2013, Lewis has been at Mercedes and has won the world title in 5 of his 7 seasons at the team. But at McLaren, arguably, particularly in 2007 and 2008, Hamilton probably had the best car on the grid. And pretty much since the turbo hybrid era, well, Mercedes have pretty much dominated that era of F1. So you could argue that takes away the shine of Hamilton's 5 world titles. By the way, I am referring to the 5 world championships he's won at Mercedes because we all know that he's won 6 world titles overall. And that leads me on to point number 2, which is the lack of competition in the F1 field. During Hamilton's time in F1, he really hasn't had a major rivalry to challenge him in his quest for his F1 titles, because when you look back on the sports history, starting from the 60s, you had the Jim Clark versus Graham Hill rivalry. In the 70s, you had the Niki Lauda versus James Hunt rivalry. The 80s, you had Nigel Mansell versus Nelson Piquet. Obviously, the biggest one of them all, in my opinion, Ayrton Senna versus Alan Prost. Even in the 90s, you had Damon Hill versus Michael Schumacher, and even Mika Hakkinen versus Michael Schumacher. They would go toe to toe, week in, week out, to try and win the F1 title. But who does Hamilton have to challenge for the world title? If you want to argue Sebastian Vettel, yes, for the 2017-2018 titles, but other than that, Vettel hasn't really been a major challenger to Hamilton's throne in the turbo hybrid era. And last but not least, point number 3. Hamilton has arguably been the most favoured driver in each and every single team he has been at and against every single teammate. Because in 2007, obviously he had Fernando Alonso as his first teammate. 2008 to 2009 was Heikki Kovalainen. 2010 to 2012, Jenson Button. 2013 to 2016, Nico Rosberg. And 2017 up until now, Valtteri Bottas. However, particularly during his time at McLaren, there were arguably reasons to suggest that he was the most favoured driver over his teammates at the time, because this was mentioned in a video in 2012, which was 8 years ago. Nearly forgot my maths for a second. But on BBC Sport, they released a video saying that Hamilton was arguably favoured over Jenson Button and Fernando Alonso during their stints at McLaren. Because as much as Hamilton is trying to pursue these records in Formula One, could it be argued that the team is trying to help him achieve his records rather than face some acceptable degree of competition from his teammates? That I'm not too sure on. By the way, guys, I do want to make it clear that as much as I've given you 3 arguments on both sides, I try and avoid being biased towards one particular side when stating my argument. I also want to make it clear that these viewpoints are not necessarily my own, and these are not my own opinions in itself. Anyway, guys, I've given the arguments for and against why Hamilton is F1's greatest driver or not, but what really matters is what you guys think. Please comment in the description below, who do you think is F1's greatest driver? And don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. And until next time, guys, peace out.